Hey there, and welcome to another Monday video update from Max Q here, the fancy Max Q workshop and the restoration of a J3 Cub. So if you've been paying attention to the other videos, you might notice that this near wing is now in the vertical position and the far wing, which was vertical, is now horizontal. So while this wing over here is the one I've been working on, it's not 100% done, but it's getting really close. And so I put it back up into the vertical position. And I have now transitioned into taking this one apart very quickly. The tip bow that's hanging over here is the new one. Of course, it's just sitting there. The old one's been removed. The Aileron hinges have all been removed. There's the 3 of them, so those are out. Here are the drag and anti-drag wires have all been pulled out. The compression struts, except for this one, are removed. So all the way down to the root, those are out. The jury strut attached fittings are off. And this, the big end strut one that coincides with where the wing struts attach, that one will be coming out very soon. And so what I've done is I've taken a bunch of the smaller pieces and I've already blasted them. They're here in the spray booth where the fuselage is. So up here, there's a bunch of the components that have already been blasted, primed, and painted. And then down at the other end of the booth, there's the 3 Aileron hinges and their associated pieces. They've been blasted, that they're ready to be painted. That'll happen here very soon. So making good progress on getting the components out of that wing. The other compression struts are down here on the floor, and all of their associated components, as I've mentioned before, I keep those all together with the same piece, even though there is a fair amount of commonality, mostly commonality between the parts. I just like to put them back in the same location that they were at. So it's kind of interesting that these compression struts are painted black, and the ones that were in this wing over here, they weren't quite this yellow, but they were definitely painted yellow. They had a little bit of surface rust on them and such. But so it would indicate that something has been done different between these 2 wings at some point in time. But they do, I mean, I have every reason to think these are the original wings that were with this airplane. But, you know, you never know. I mean, I guess the logbooks would show that. I have not looked deep into the logbooks at this point in time. But this wing, the second wing here, is just a tiny bit cleaner, I think, all things considered. So anyway, it is a little dirty, I will say that, but they were both dirty. It needs cleaned up is what I'm saying. So I'll get onto that here soon so that it's cleaned up before I start putting in the cleaned up and painted hardware or components. But anyway, again, this is going nice and quick like I was hoping that it would. The first wing over here, I did get all the leading edge on, so all the way down to the root. Now, and if you know, obviously this outer skin is not the same dimensions as what the other skins are. That's the way the Cubs have always been. So definitely looks a little different. Both on that's the lower side. This would be the top side. Same thing. It doesn't go all the way back to the spar like the other sections of leading edge do. And I really can't say why that was done other than possibly just to save a little bit of weight. So anyway, the leading edge went really, really well. And I think that it's going to go pretty quick over here on this other wing, like I was hoping. But of course, things don't usually go quite as slick as what you'd want. So, you know, there'll be a little more time involved. But it'll surely be a lot faster than it was here on the first wing. One of the things I was going to show is this little tool that I made. I showed it in the previous video, but now I've used it, and that's for locating on the sections of the leading edge that actually do wrap all the way around the spar here and have this flange. I used all the original holes that were drilled in the leading edge flange there because I didn't want to put any new holes in that. But that's a bit of a challenge. On the Super Cub, I did it by eye, and it worked fine, but it was time consuming. So I thought, well, I should be smarter. And so instead of just buying a hole locator, which Most of them are sort of large, so I like the idea of this one because it's small to get into this little bit tighter area, and I like the challenge of trying to make one. So basically the idea is pretty simple. This pin, which is really a rivet that I shaped the end of it down a little bit so it'll drop down into the holes, and so it then the two halves of the locator go on either side of the aluminum, and then the pin would drop down in the hole, and then that's lined right up with this hole in the outer section, and so you drill your hole there and it's going to be lined right up with the pin, which is in the hole. So anyway, it's just a real simple way to make sure that you get the holes in the right spot, and it worked great. So I was real happy with the way that all turned out. Another thing I was going to show that is a little unusual, but I have some fingernail polish here, and no, I'm not weird like that, but I use that in a pretty simple way. Like up here on these elastic lock nuts, when I snug them down and they're done, then I put a little bit of the green of the nail polish there on the nut, so that it just tells me that's sort of my like certification of that's complete, and I don't have to worry about it. If you could make a note, but what if you lose the notes or they don't? It's just, this is such a simple and easy way to verify that you have that complete. An awful lot of the hardware on a Cub is castle nuts and cotter pins. Obviously those, because of their nature, you wouldn't put the cotter pin in if you didn't have that already snugged. So you know that one's complete. But with the elastic lock nuts, it's not as, there's no way to know really, you know, other than putting a wrench on it again. So, but those markings, that verifies that it's all good. So kind of a simple little thing. I just think it's actually kind of a fun thing to do. But anyway, that's that. So let's see, what else do we have here on the list? Oh yeah, I was going to talk about, many of you would certainly know this, but some may not know that where you have screws and such, like these, there's screws that are holding the leading edge to the ribs and such here, and the fabric's going to go over that. And so we try anywhere that the aircraft fabric is going to come in contact with something that could chafe or scratch, damage the fabric, we want to do something to protect it. Here's a good spot here where the nose ribs extend through the cutout, and so a piece of tape is put over that to give protection to the fabric. And so in the past, there's all kinds of different tapes you can use, but I'm trying on this project, and I'm really liking it so far, it's actually gaff tape. And so it's easy to tear. It's got a great adhesive because it's nicely sticky, but you can also reposition it, or for example, I'm pretty confident that it'll peel off fairly easily the next time these wings get covered, because I have dealt with some tapes, sticky tapes that are so sticky that they leave their residue, they're hard to get off and such. So, and then the other thing is it is a fabric tape, so it has a little bit of stretch and give to it. So that helps to go over things like a screw and not leave any ridges and such. So anyway, I think this gaff tape is going to work really nice. And this wing isn't complete that way. I've got a lot of the chafe points are covered, but not all of them yet. So that's one of the things. I have a list of things yet that need to be done on this wing before it's ready for cover. But predominantly, it's very close to all being there. And one of the other big things then that I'm doing is working on the cables, the Aileron cables that go inside the wing, and of course are there to actuate the ailerons. So I've got this long 2x6 on the floor, and you can put screws at one end, and then the thimble can drop right over the screw, and that way you can pull snug and in theory just mimic the length of the original cables. Now the thing that's been kind of interesting on this project is that within the loop of the cable, because essentially that's what the cable does, it just makes a round trip between the stick out to the aileron, and the cables come back and then back to the stick. So there's a specified length, but one of the cables is a little bit short, the other one's a little bit long, which means it all balances out in the long run. But I'm not sure, these cables maybe have been replaced at some point in time, and maybe the first one wasn't accurately made and the second one then had to be compensated. But I'm going to make the new cables the length they're supposed to be, and that should work out really well. But regardless, using this board like this and pulling them nice and tight and measuring has given me the opportunity to identify exactly where these cables are in their length, and that's where I figured out that they're not quite matching what they ought to be, but we'll get that squared away. Now there's one other thing that's kind of interesting. There's, as you might know if you're familiar with Cub, or you will certainly know, but if you don't know, it is kind of interesting that one of the cables on a Cub actually comes down the wing strut, on the back side of the wing strut, to get it back into the cockpit and attached to the torque tube so that it's connected to the control stick. So there's a large fair lead that's on the strut, but there's also this little tiny fair lead that Piper used, and we still use them today. And the interesting thing is they're not split in half so that they can go on after the ends are on the cable. You have to put this fair lead on the cable, then you can put the ends on, because obviously it's not going to go over that end. So anyway, you can buy these, but they're kind of pricey. They're no more than there is to them. This one it looks to be made out of phenolic, which was the way some of them were made back in the day. Some of the really old ones are actually just made out of wood, and then the modern ones typically are made out of a white plastic. But what I've done is I've acquired some plastic rod that is an industrial type plastic machinable rod that works well because of its slip characteristics, low wear and such. So I'm going to use the lathe and just make some of those real quick, which should be kind of fun. I mean, it's not that expensive that you wouldn't buy them, but I enjoy the opportunities to do some things that require a little additional work. So I think that we'll cover that in detail in the future here, but I think that's going to work out real slick, and that chunk of rod there would make enough of these for a whole bunch of airplanes. I'll just make a couple of them, but anyway, I need to make those before I put the ends on the cable so that they're properly in place. So other than that, there hasn't been a bunch of earth-shaking things done to look at. But so the one thing I thought I would talk about, because I did over the weekend had a little more reason to be thinking about clipped wing Cubs. So I have experience from when I was younger with Piper Cub that had the short wings on it, and I think most people know that there's a clipped wing Cub concept out there, but you know, I've been surprised how few people have direct experience with them. And then some people seem to have had what they'd call less than a good experience with them, but I don't really understand that, because when I was young, let's see, when I was 18, my dad bought well, here's some pictures that show the clipped wing Cub that we had. When we first got it, when I was actually 18, it was this white with the stripes on it, which was a little too wild for my taste. But that was my very first experience actually with any Cub. I had never flown. I learned to fly in a Citabria, and I had a little bit of champ time and such, but a Cub was sort of new to me. And so all my initial experience was in the clipped wing Cub, and it had a 90 Continental on it. And for 2 years we had that airplane, and man, oh man, did I fall in love with every aspect of that airplane. Now, I'm sure there are some that don't perform as well as others, because you have that in full span Cubs. There can be all kinds of reasons why an airplane doesn't perform as well as it should. But this particular one that we had, even though it wasn't specifically beautiful, it just flew fantastic. It had 90 horses on it, it had a metal prop, and it was just an absolute joy to fly. It climbed like crazy. Interestingly, power off, a clipped wing Cub does come down pretty fast. It doesn't float at all like a full span Cub. But honestly, I kind of like that, because it gives you super easy control on the glide path simply with power. And I guess like higher wing loading airplanes, and I don't mind if an airplane comes out of the sky a little bit with the power off. And so obviously there are times when that means you have to be, you've got to plan a little bit more to make sure that you're not getting yourself into a bad situation. But I really like the short wing, especially because with the right engine and prop combination, these airplanes will still climb really well. In fact, I don't have any pictures that show this, but my dad was a fairly big guy, and he was a skydiver, and he had a big rig. He always had old-fashioned gear, and it was heavy and bulky. And I flew him to jump out of the Cub once. He sat sideways in the front seat with his legs hanging out, so more drag, and he was heavy. And that little clip wing Cub climbed just dandy. And we probably only went to 3,000 or 4,000 feet, but regardless, it was amazing that it was still as happy with the door open, feet hanging out, and quite a bit of weight in the airplane, and it performed really, really well. So that's when I learned that a clip wing Cub not only has all that beautiful nostalgic look to it, it has the ability to fly with the door open, but it also, the performance is not only decent on the climb. Of course, it's not really any faster than a regular Cub, but it's way sportier handling. And in that sense, it's sort of like a very poor man's fighter, and that makes it a ton of fun. So that was back 1979 when we first got that airplane, and then it was gone from our world in 1981. And so I didn't actually have any Cub experience again until 2014. I went and got current because I had many years I hadn't been current. And so I got current up at Hartford at Cub Air, and in a full span Cub. In fact, that was the first time I'd ever even flown a full span Cub, was on a flight review. But it just went great, and I really enjoyed the process. And of course, I think that had an 85 on it. And the interesting thing is, when you take 85 horse on a full span Cub, it really brings the airplane to life. So part of what makes a clip wing Cub so nice is having that either 85 or 90 horses on it. But so anyway, that was 2014 when I got current in a J3. And so after I did the Super Cub, which was completed in 2018, I had the opportunity to acquire actually this airplane, which is pretty sad looking. A hangar collapsed on this clipped wing Cub, the white airplane. It was a clipped wing Cub, and the hangar collapsed and obviously did a tremendous amount of damage. If you watch the early videos that I did here of this particular full span J3 Cub project, I had a second fuselage in here, and that's the fuselage that's in this picture damaged. So the wings obviously were shot, spars completely broken and such, but the fuselage predominantly survived, but there are some tubes that are out of place and such. So as I've been thinking about wanting to get my Cub restored, which is going to be a major project either way, I've toyed with the idea at times of trying to go the experimental route, but here's what I've actually just started to really seriously consider, is that if I went ahead and built an entirely new fuselage for it, and then built new wings up, but using some of the miscellaneous components that still survive from the old airplane, then I'm pretty sure I would fully qualify for an amateur-built experimental registration for the airplane. And there's so much freedom that comes with being experimental. One, because you can make some alterations where you see fit, and then secondarily, maintenance becomes far less expensive, and you can do much of the work, if not all the work, yourself. So that's kind of the direction I'm thinking, is maybe I'll go ahead and build a whole new fuselage, because I do have the Wag Aero Sport Trainer plans that are for that exact purpose. So, and to go along with that, so I have a good friend down in Muncie, Mike Finney, and here he is, standing right next to his home-built clipped wing Cub, and then he restored that full span Cub that's behind him there. But back in 2012, Mike's, I think that's when he finished his clipped wing Cub, and it is a stunningly beautiful airplane. And it's really interesting to note that not only was it an incredibly beautiful airplane when he first built it, but it looks exactly the same today, even though I believe he's got 500 hours on the airplane, but it is spotless, and it is an incredible flying machine. And so here's some more pictures as we look. In fact, it looks like it's a model sitting in the grass here, but that's a real full-scale airplane, just a picture taken from up above to give it a little different look. And then as we look at some more pictures here, his airplane is just absolutely stunning. He's got a 90 Continental on that. Now he has a wood prop, and there are a lot of people who really enjoy wood propellers because of both the nostalgic look and the fact that they tend to reduce vibration in the engine to some extent. I'm kind of interested in the metal prop because that clipped wing that we had the metal prop, and I was just always amazed at the performance. I'm sure Mike's airplane's probably a little lighter, and it's certainly far cleaner. It's very true, super clean. And by clean, I don't mean spotless. I mean that aerodynamically, it's very clean. Everything fits perfect and smooth. And so his performance is probably significantly better than that 90 horse clip wing that we had back in the day. So his wood prop may perform just as well, though I would say a metal prop on his airplane would increase the performance. So anyway, but as you look at these pictures, obviously there's so much incredible nostalgia that goes with the lines of a Cub. And so the clip-wing Cub retains all of that, but then it adds these additional, a little bit more fun flying. And I mean, you can't even dispute the fact that the short wing does make it easier to move in and out of a hangar and such. So, and the other thing that's kind of nice is it does increase the wing loading. So the airplane does better in turbulence. It's easier to handle in crosswinds. It's easier to handle on the ground in gusty wind conditions. So to me, actually, I honestly can't see any reason not to have the wings shorter on a Cub. It to me takes a wonderful airplane, one of the world's most iconic aircraft, and it makes it nearly the world's best airplane because of the low cost of operation with this airplane, the fact that it has 2 seats, the fact that you can fly with the door open, that it has all the nostalgia value, and then as it turns out, a clip-wing Cub is also a decent little basic aerobatic aircraft. So it just does everything that I would consider important in an airplane. Yeah, if you want to get from point A to point B in a hurry and comfortably, okay, it doesn't do that. There's no question about that. So it's not the answer for everybody. But with that in mind, everybody ought to have an airplane that'll carry some stuff and go fast. And then you should also have a clip-wing Cub because there is just no better flying than with that kind of an airplane. So even taking it further then, it's not just that you can have fun in the summer with this airplane. Mike's put his airplane on skis several times. And in fact, like in this picture, I actually got to go flying with him on the skis. I got to make some takeoffs and landings in it on the skis. And of course, we had the door shut for that in the wintertime. But and then this picture here, I mean, if that doesn't show a poor man's fighter with the skis on it and those short wings, I don't know what does. That is so incredible, at least to me. And then here, I thought I'd show how the Sport Trainer plans, they show the standard wing, and you can see there the 4 bays of the drag and anti-drag wires. And then here we can morph into the plans for the clipped wing version. And you can see there's only 3 total bays there. So the whole 1 bay, which is about 40.5 inches on each side of the wing, on each wing that have been removed. So it's nearly 7 feet shorter than a standard Cub. So it's a pretty significant difference, and it's very obvious. Like, it's kind of funny when you see a clip wing Cub, it almost looks like the airplane's longer than the wingspan. It's not, but you're just so used to seeing wings significantly longer than a fuselage that, yeah, it definitely has a very, very different look. So, and then the other thing I was going to say is that some of the ideas that I have, if I did go full experimental, are things that they're meant to make the airplane maybe a little bit lighter if I can, or at least offset some other things I would do differently that might make it a little heavier. And then also to simplify the building process. So one of the ideas I've thought about, and this airplane here, this Giles Henderson clip-wing Cub that's well known from the past from an aerobatic standpoint, it has a fully rigid gear. And it's simplified, and obviously there'd be some challenges there. You're going to have to be more cautious landing. However, I would also put the 850 soft tires on the airplane like they'd be the same ones that are on my Baby Ace. And I believe that would be even more shock absorption than than what the old Vagabond. So Piper's Vagabond, which they made after the war, the first version, the PA-15, it had a fully rigid landing gear. And yeah, for a trainer airplane and such, it wasn't necessarily the best answer, because a lot of people were going to be having a little bit of trouble making soft landings on a regular basis. Yet they built hundreds of those airplanes before they finally made the PA-17, which included a bungee gear system. So obviously it's not impractical, it's just not for everybody. But I like the idea of the simplicity of the rigid gear. And then here last, I'll show the concept that I have, and I've had this concept ever since I got this damaged clipped wing Cub, to give it a sort of a military paint scheme, but it's not any kind of standard military paint scheme. It actually is kind of a hybrid between the civilian lightning bolt going down the side of the airplane and an L4 military paint scheme. And it's neither one of those. It's just a hybrid, but it kind of, I think it's a cool thing. It would make me very happy to have my little fighter. In fact, I call it the Battle Bear instead of just a Cub. So anyway, if I can pull all this off here, maybe in the next couple of years, I could actually get this crazy little airplane flying, and that would sure make me very happy. But for right now, we're restoring a full span J3 Cub. And so thanks for following along, and hey, we'll see you next week. Thanks, and bye-bye.